Hello and welcome to Macro Mondays, presented to you by the Goxteen News Network. I am your host, Landy. Today is July 21st, 2025. We're going to look at Bitcoin today. We'll check in on Bitcoin dominance. We'll take a look at Ethereum, and something pretty important has happened with Solana's price action as well. So we will take a look at that and just kind of follow up with where we left off last week. We are going to start on the daily, and then we'll check on the weekly here. And kind of move through maybe some of the lower term timeframes, see if that can give us a little bit of an edge as to what is occurring here on the daily and potentially where things might head next. To start with, Bitcoin has pushed a little bit lower. We are now in lower low territory. In terms of swings, we're in a swing downtrend, lower low closing territory, but this is all pretty much just a complex high because we didn't actually see in this case, a higher low set up here. The last closing higher low is still down here, coming in at $108,000. What we do have, though, is a lower high that has now been formed up here. So we have a higher high, we have a lower high, and we have a bit of a swing downtrend going on. So we have the higher low, lower high, and now, we still have the opportunity even, to possibly close a higher low swing as it relates to this last swing. But in reality, this is a lower high. So what are we looking for from here? Bitcoin's kind of right in the important daily zone. And realistically, if it does drop the low here at 115,700, be aware on the daily that we do want to see for the bulls closes above the basis band here, which is coming in just below $115,000 at 114,873 in this case. So we can call it 114,900, 115. If we do start to see that area dropped on a closing basis, then we could be looking at Bitcoin correcting down to the 112 to 109 area here. Now you'll note that this does encompass the highs on the dailies here, including a little bit of this order block candle here on the daily where the last higher low did come in. This is actually a big weekly zone. So this is the last weekly higher low, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and just double check here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's the daily high side zone. Higher low is down here at 100,000. And 90, it's a 101 essentially to 98 to 25. So on the daily here, this is the previous weekly higher high. And then we have the last daily higher low and a close. Yes, we do have a higher low swing and a lower high swing. But so far we just have a lower high close up here. So with the closure of which candle? It would have to be the Sunday candle, right? Yes, it was the Sunday candle that closed this lower high. What does this really mean, though? It's just consolidation until we see Bitcoin either break down below the swing and lose the basis, more importantly, which would be the bullish half of the band set here, and then possibly correct down to retest the breakout zone and the big weekly zone. And it is a big one at 112 to 109. But if it does stay above the 115,700 on a closing basis, yes, that does mean that it can swing down below. But as long as it's closing inside of this last swing low at 115,700, it's more likely that we're going to see it try to pop back up towards the top side here. Now, we did see in the Monday session that Bitcoin did retest the higher high close. Not the higher high swing, but the higher high close. You can see that it came right up to that 119,800 level and then rejected and then closed back below 117,800 essentially. So right below the close open here. If this does trade back above right around that 119, 120 level, that would put Bitcoin back above the upper first standard deviation, likely running this lower high swing up here somewhere around the 121 area. We do need to see closes above there to initiate a move back to the high at $123,000, just shy of the upper second standard deviation, which is now coming in right around 123.6 or so. Now, if we did start to see closes above the 123 level here, the all-time high, and more importantly, and the upper second standard deviation, and even if it does trade to 123, I'd be looking for a swing area just above this upper second standard deviation, about 123 to 125. If we started to see closes above it, though, if it hadn't already taken a trip up to where the upper third is by $128,000, that's the next big place I'd be looking for to the upside. So essentially, Bitcoin, you want to see it holding, on closes around 115 and closing back above 115,700 if it does test to the downside. Otherwise, we're looking 112 to 109 initially to the downside. Be aware that if we start to see 109 dropped, that endangers this last closing consolidation structure down here at 108 on a closing basis and 107 270 on a swing basis. That would look pretty nasty, but it's in terms of like a longer term time frame, like we'll look at the weekly here in a second, doesn't mean too much unless it started to break down towards that 101 level, which we are operating in a bit of on a bit of a different chart here. And what I would like to do actually is go ahead and show you why this level down here is so important, just as a reminder, or for those that might be new. This area down here, well, this was the prior midpoint zone. It's a little bit higher than the midpoint, but the high side zone here at around 101 to 104 before testing the all-time high, where we had the double top on a close at 106 with the 108.4 and 109.360 highs in the green zone down here, which is fair game if Bitcoin does start to break down. There is daily levels all through this structure here, but we start closing below 107, then we have to start looking back to, that 106 level where the lower second standard deviation is on the daily. And you can see that's right where these two closes came in, the double top on a close. Anywhere below there, then we're looking right back to the 1272, somewhere around 104 to that 101 area. And this is going to be important, right? That's the big weekly higher low on a close and swing basis down there. So we do want to see Bitcoin kind of shit or get off the pot here pretty soon and try to make that move to the upside. Doesn't mean that it can't test to the downside. It is fine to test to the downside. And if it does, you just want to see preferably 109 to that 112 area by the highs as a retest zone, and not really breaking below and closing below. That would start to look pretty nasty, to be honest with you. Doesn't mean it would be, but it would start to look that way. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the weekly. And you can see the weekly tagged our upper second standard deviation last week. That's where we got our $123,000 call hit. And again, where did I get 123? Why was it 123? Well, if you recall, on the way up, prior, when we made the 112 high and then started to head down for a couple weeks here, I'd mentioned that if it heads back to the high above 112, it was essentially, I'm looking for closes above 112 to be 112 to 115. But if we saw closes above 115, even on the daily, I was immediately raising those targets 118 to 120. We got that. And then anywhere above 120, I was looking to 123 based on the weekly upper second standard deviation, which is now at where? $125,000. Recall just a few moments ago when I said on the daily that there is the potential to run back to the highs, right? So start trading above 120. We do need to see 121 closed above, even on lower term timeframes, to go run that 123 area as a possibility. But if it hasn't and it closes above 120, 121, on the daily, then I'd be looking 123 anywhere above there, 123 to 125, because that is where the upper second standard deviation is on the weekly. Could it, hit higher? Of course, that's where we get the 1414s that I've been showing from both the local and the long-term structure from last cycle. And that's around 128 to 130 at a 1414 log fib on both this big move down, which is a monthly higher high to a monthly higher low. And then, of course, the $69,000 to $15,500 prior cycle area. So that's the 1414. I've shown this so many times. I know people are getting sick of it, but that 1414 is going to be the same if you were to pull a log scale fib on macro timeframes for the prior cycle $69,000 high to $15,500 low. The fib extension 1414 is perfectly lined up with the local. So it is a confluent area of interest. Anywhere above there on the weekly, though, and especially closing back above the upper second standard deviation, you can see the upper third, much like I speculated on Friday, is now starting to push up towards a 1618 from this local fib pull extension. And that's at around, 138. I would even, I'd even call 140 up there. If we primarily, we got to see weeklies closing above 128 to 130, though, to make that a possibility. Mid 130s to upper 130s around, essentially 138, 140. And then we start looking up to 150, which is a 786 or 1786 in this case. Not anything too crazy. Now, why do I have all this stuff here on the screen still? Why did I keep all the support and resistances for the daily on the longer term? Because we have the weekly here on the higher high close and swing and the higher low close and swing. And then we've got daily area and another daily area to pay attention to the top side, right? So why, though, am I keeping that up on the screen here? Because I want to illustrate a point here. We now have the basis band above the last higher low swing. We do want to see this above the higher low close at 101. So preferably we want to see Bitcoin hanging above the upper first standard deviation here, which is now above $112,000. So that's a good thing for the bulls here. But if we do start cracking below it, especially closing below it on a weekly, then we're likely pushing that 109, maybe even that daily, maybe even correcting back down towards that higher low structure. But, we got to give it a chance. Right now, the volatility zone of interest is between that 112 and that 125. Anywhere above that, we start to kick off volatility expansion to the upside in terms of price. We see closes on the weekly. Then we start looking at weekly volatility expansion, which right now we are in a volatility contraction on the weekly because we are coming off mean reversion and just now picking up, but taking our time in this case. And we had already initiated that expansion, got the mean reversion, higher low, higher high, looking for that continuation and a really kickoff expansion above the upper second standard deviation that would start to paint the picture of this going probably much further up. Though the 120 to 130 is likely not going to be where it stops if that's the case. Too early to call, quite frankly. I know that a lot of people are very excited, but it's still too early to call. We got to watch price very closely in the coming weeks here. And I would say from the weekly time frame, you want to see it closing above 112,500 there by the upper first. And, this is hot to trot up here. It can stay up here for a long time in terms of momentum. This is a regular Stochh, not a Stochh RSI, which measures the velocity of RSI. And we can see that the pivot is going to be at $115,000. So there you go. You have confluence with my 115.7 downside area for a swing. Need to see closes above 115.7 on the weekly. Preferred closes above 115. On the daily, you want to see closes coming above 115.7. Preferably. Can swing down to like 115, maybe even under towards the daily basis, but you want to see closes on the weekly hang above 115. And on the daily, you can see that we are, right at the edge of the bullish control zone for regular stochastic momentum indicator. But let's go ahead and check on the 12-hour. This is going to be kind of a leading indicator. And yes, you can go to lower term timeframes like the 4 and 6 hour to kind of get, monitor closes on maybe when momentum might turn for the 12-hour. I do want to note here, yes, swing down trend consolidation. Kind of trendless structure going on here for the 12-hour. Very easy to pick out. If we start closing back above 12500, we're probably going to be testing or have already tested 121 up here. If we start closing above the upper second and above $121,000, that would be 12-hour expansion. This is a nice compression, by the way. That would be a 12-hour expansion right back to the high side structure, 121,500 by the upper third, and then likely 123, 125 thereafter, maybe even more to 128 to 130. Same goes for the downside, though. Very easy criteria. Any closes below 116, we're going to call it 116,350. That would be expansion back to the low there at 115.7. Now, again, we would need to see a break on a close below 115.7 plus the 12-hour, and we're in expansion to the downside, right? And that's where we're looking for possible swing zones at 115 even and under around the daily basis band as a possibility, and then possibly a move on expansion down to the 112 to 109. This is a really simple setup. The criteria is very clear. If we close above the upper second, we're expanding back to the local high, and then we look to the higher highs. In order to get continued expansion, we need to see closes above there, and that's where we can hit deeper targets. If it fails any of those areas, it's likely just going to come back down. Same for the bottom side. We need to see closes below, well, drop the closing lows here that Bitcoin's been sitting on for the 12-hour here. It's kind of like this nice basis support for the 12-hour is a little different than the daily, right? Although the daily you could call the close open in there. But really below 116,350, that would be expansion towards the low. We would need to see close over close, price momentum, really picking up on volatility expansion to the downside below there. So close over close below. If it starts to close back in, move might be over, might not be. You have to evaluate from there if it finds this area as resistance, because otherwise we'd be looking for expansion down to the next big area of interest. And that's where things can get a little goofy for some people, but it's very clear on the 12-hour, and the setup will become very clear. The momentum is still, fairly low. It's in the bearish control zone. Doesn't mean too much. Closes above 117, 700, 118 area would turn this back to the upside. But realistically, we need to see a low set on the 12-hour here. So 12-hour low would be set technically be above 119,300, but we really need to see the 119,860 up here. That would really do it to set the low and then possibly head back up towards this high and possibly hit the top side as well and maybe go for more. Otherwise, it is a little bit more biased to the downside, being in the bearish half. Looks a little bit better back above around 118.5 or so. Especially on closes, but that's just an indication that it might try to set a low by the upper first here where it rejected on the last 12-hour candle, but again needs to get above the same daily area that was rejected in the Monday high. So early Monday session. Then we can evaluate once a low is set, is momentum turning? Is there a low set here? Likely going to get bearish divergence on anything, even if it sets a low here. We'll likely see is it local? Yeah, so it's likely going to throw continuation drives of bullish divergence here or hidden bull divs. If it does start to creep down under, so if it does close even locally here around that 116, 115.7, we could see a little bit of a hidden bull div drive. I mean, there is some available here if it sets a low here right now, but it's not much. All that really means is like it could pop it back up locally towards that 120, 121 area. And in this case, could you go and get some bias on like the 4-hour? Sure. If the 4-hour stays here locally, sets a little double bottom here, sets a low, back above, it's got to set a low back above basically 117,800 or so. It's a little bit shy of that, 117,700, and then start to pop back into range. Sure. Maybe it can throw some bullish divergence. Not really. There's not much there, but it could possibly turn momentum if it just hangs here and lets the momentum oscillator reset around 119.3. Maybe that'll come down towards the 118, 117 level and start to provide some relief here locally. And then you'd be looking for that to bleed through into the 12-hour on closes, start to turn back up for momentum, start to run the high and higher, and then start to break out on expansion. That would look really good. And then I'd be referencing the 4-hour for momentum and volatility and all that stuff. And in fact, you can see here on the 4-hour, pretty easy setup. Expansion, if we start dropping yesterday's lows basically at 116.5, that'd be expansion into this lower low over here. And then possibly lower if it starts closing outside of that, right? And then right back to the top side, start closing above yesterday's high. That'd be expansion right into this area here, 119.8 to 121. And then close above there, then we can start looking back here and possibly higher. Pretty easy setups going on right now for Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin. It trades so damn clean. It always has. Well, I shouldn't say always has, but it has more often than not in the past at least 10 years. I know that many would be like, wait, 2015, 2016? Yeah, it traded really clean even then. Let's go ahead and take a look at ETH. ETH, Beautiful, beautiful move above the daily level here that we were talking about on Friday. It's kind of a daily weekly, right? So it's a weekly. We got a higher low and then basically right into a lower high. So it is a weekly area. It's not as important as the big area up here. You could call it 4K up here, right? But realistically, the zone is between 3930 and 4400 essentially up there. And this is a nice reclaim on the weekly and then sitting on top early in the week here. Close above the upper second standard deviation is good. Now, again, I need to see this area not only tested, around 3930 to 4K is going to be pretty important, right? This is where we saw no closes above. This is an 88.8% level from last cycle. So it's, we still have, another 12% to go to get to the highs. But realistically, I need to see a reclaim on the daily that turn into a weekly and then see a weekly close above 4,400. That would look really good on a breakout to go run the prior all-time high and higher. And everybody's saying, well, alt season, alt season, alt season. The big thing is yeah, this is beautiful structure. We got a lower high, higher low, nice, trend reversal set up to trend break. We need to see another higher low. So no matter how high this goes, it's all about the correction and where Bitcoin dominance is on that correction. If ETH is holding up well, when the market corrects again, then we're probably in for a full-blown alt season. Until then, it's a prolonged mini alt season. We're not seeing the levels to hit full-blown alt season just yet for Bitcoin dominance. But, this could be what brings it there on the next correction, especially if it just corrects like shallow to like 3K around the upper first or even higher. Like, that would look really good. And then try to blast off through this next level towards this prior all-time high and higher. That would look great. And then quite frankly, it starts to break out above there, probably looking at 6,500 to 7K, maybe 7,500 to 8K, as some of the initial targets, and then 10Ks on the board, so on and so forth. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I know this chart's a little bit of a mess, but I did want to touch on it. ETH looks fine. Biggest moves usually come in the overbought zone. We don't have both Stokes in there, but both the K and the D, just the K is in there, but they're projected to go in their next move. So you do want to see if this does correct from here. Just a theory. If it does correct from here, what you want to see is just higher low on Stoke, and then obviously it's not going to go to 114, but you know what I mean. Just get a bullish reset on momentum. There is, this is a new trend form, so higher low, higher high. It is not a full-blown complete trend, but it is, it's kind of out of the woods for local. It is out of the woods for local divergence, but it could get some historical corrective bearish divergence, and then come back to it later. Solana, I haven't checked on Solana in a while, but, maybe I did. It was last week, right? I needed to see close above 180. Then I was looking towards that, essentially the 190 level. And we got the close on the daily above 190, move up to the upper second standard deviation in this weekly candle, starting to push around 200. Above there, we got 210. That is a big area. But it's a fairly quick trip. Even historically to 250 would be a fairly quick trip up there on expansion, especially if it closes this week anywhere above 195, 200. That looks really good. We finally got our higher low trend reversal set up to result in a trend break. So this is now the formation of a new trend or trend confirmation. That doesn't mean that it can't dump the low, but I'd expect this to actually, keep heading up a little bit more, trying up, even if it does correct on the daily. Last higher lows all the way down here at 125. Looks pretty good for right now. We'll see what this leads to. And in fact, it's got room on momentum. Looks very good. Well, it's daily. Daily's getting a little hot to trot, but it's still looking good. In fact, it could try up the upper third around that 109, 110, or maybe even try to swing above it and kind of do what ETH has been doing and just stretch those bands and keep walking it up. And that would look really, really good for Solana. Let's go ahead and take a look at Bitcoin dominance. So again, Bitcoin dominance is a big topic lately. And all Bitcoin dominance is the percentage of market share that Bitcoin takes up of the total market cap. In this case, it's 60.5%. So it's dumped down, but just, remember last year, in November, we had an even bigger dump down. Of course, we saw ETH make its highs and that it kept tapping at around 4K, and has continued to do so. But, and then we had highs on Solana and like all that kind of stuff, right? So the big thing is like this took 12 bars or 12 days from the actual high to the low. Another little dump off, we had 14 days or 14 bars. We had another one that was like I didn't actually measure this. I don't know why I didn't measure this one. Just lazy, I guess. 7 days to the low. Now we're at 24 days. So this is more prolonged. And it's the longest that we've seen in quite a while. And in fact, if we were to go back in time, when was the last time that we saw a prolonged dump off? Yeah, it's not really a dump off. Like, this was just structure being built. Yeah, okay, so we're all the way back to 2022 coming into the actual lows. So, yeah, I mean, this is where you want to see macro structure start to break down. This is hitting lower second area of interest. It's only an 8.5% dump, or an 8% dump, 8.5% dump, or whatever it is on Bitcoin dominance, which we're going from higher high to trend break. And yes, you can use trend on this. And in fact, that's what you want to see. So if the market corrects and Bitcoin dumps off and Ethereum and Solana and everything else dump off with it, but they hold up better than Bitcoin, then you'll see this continue down. If Bitcoin corrects and Bitcoin dominance, puts in a low, then it's all about, where does Ethereum and all the rest of the alts find their footing for very highly statistically likely higher lows on dailies, especially. And if it does that, and Bitcoin dominance is rising, does it make lower highs? And then when things head back up, are the alts eating faster than Bitcoin? So eating into some of that dominance, right? Getting some more liquidity inflows and stuff like that. So it's really all about the next big correction in markets. And, so far we're just consolidating for Bitcoin, and we have alts running. That's what we'd like to see in this scenario to set up an alt season. But it's always a mini alt season until it becomes full-blown alt season. And that always happens, and that will start to show itself, I should say, on the next big correction. So on the daily, next big correction for Ethereum, Solana, so on and so forth, Sui, and all the rest, right? And then where, when things actually put in lows, does Bitcoin dominance, do those hold up better than Bitcoin in terms of the Bitcoin pair? And if they do, and start to pick back up, where does lower highs come in for Bitcoin? And then on the weekly, that's kind of what you want to pay attention to. So far, so good. This is still expansion to the downside. I would beware. It's getting up to an important area. And, I wouldn't be surprised to see a correction here pretty soon, at least on the daily, but that doesn't, moves aren't quite over just yet for alts. And maybe even, let me check on traditional markets. I know this is a little bit longer video, but I wanted to cover some of this stuff because I do think it's important. And traditional markets are just kind of continuing. Hey, remember that 1 week bull edge that I talked about a long time ago? We finally hit it. On compression for the daily, if this breaks out above, we're probably looking at another leg in markets. Maybe that helps everything out and encourages the risk environment for alts as well, which is always helpful. Let's go ahead and actually take a look at our high yield corporate bonds. And yeah, nice little downtrend, nice little reversal back into compression, breakout back above. Shit, man. Breakout back above 80.50. It's right back to the highs. Could run. So that would provide for high yield corporate treasuries are a little bit more risky. So when you see a nice uptrend, nice consolidation bounce up, it usually bodes well for a positive risk environment to keep continuing. And then we kind of come back to it later. All right, so that's going to do it for me today. Covered a lot. Watch the local structure for Bitcoin. You want to see closes, preferably, even if we do see swings down below 115.7, you want to see closes coming in, preferably above there. Doesn't mean that it has to, but I would like to see closes coming in above around 115,000. That is right where the basis band is. Otherwise, it is going to start to look like we want to go back and test. Doesn't mean we will, but it's going to start to look like we want to go back and test 112 to 109 and then watch 120 to 121 to the upside. Anywhere above there, we're going to start breaking out an expansion, 4-hour, 12-hour, so on and so forth, back to the highs at 123 to 125 and possibly 128 to 130. All right, you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe, and of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care.